Elives.
Okay.
On a Sunday morning, and we have a really interesting session lined up. So I think coming from some of the feedback that you all had given is that you'd also like to hear about the client perspective and how client expectations are changing and how that is in a way impacting what customer success teams need to think about and focus on. So we have a really interesting session today where we have Ashok Nayak from Australia, Melbourne, joining us. It's 2:30 on a Sunday, so really have to give him credit for being here and awake. Uh, and I'm going to just share my screen and quickly do a run through on what you can expect over the next 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll pass it on to Ashok. Okay, so part of our expert dialogue series. So Ashok currently is based out of Melbourne. I think he's been in Australia for quite a while now, and he's currently the general manager digital for APAC. And he handles customer success, cloud transformation, data, and intelligence at Mindtree. Where we on the last week we actually finished the framework. In terms of the framework, we landed on renewal, where we had a session with Rahul Gandhi, and next week we move into expansion and how do we expand roles and advocacy. So we thought this is a nice time to bring in a fresh global perspective from someone who comes from a very different set of markets, which could be interesting to you as learners. We talked about churn, retention, renewals last week, and we also talked about how do you manage churn and the different types of churn, and where is should be the focus of the customer success teams. What should be your priorities in terms of focusing on what kind of churn and what are the kind of proactive steps you can take to avoid it. All right, so this is just a quick recap of what we did last week, but a quick introduction to Ashok. So over 25 years of experience, and he has a very interesting set of domain experiences in digital transformation strategy, but also in automation. And I see that he has experience in RPA as well as in outsourcing. So interestingly, he actually built the Wipro digital business in Australia and then expanded it into the ASEAN region and Japan, and obviously grew the business there both organically and inorganically. He's also helped in the acquisition of a design team from Sift and brought it into the Wipro Design It brand in Australia itself, right? And he's recently moved to Mindtree, and where he's looking after their entire digital business in APAC, right? So he leads customer success, which means that he has great experience dealing with clients across the APAC region, and I think his perspective on how things are changing and evolving could be really interesting. But his responsibilities don't stop at CS. He also looks at digital engineering and data and intelligence services, right? So really a fantastic, diverse set of experience that Ashok brings to the table, and we're super fortunate to have him here. And thank you once again for doing this, Ashok. And I'm going to pass on the baton to you. As usual, everyone, if you have questions, please put up your hand, and Ashok can also see them, and I'm happy to moderate on questions as you have them. All yours, Ashok.
Thanks a lot, Anand. I'll just grab the screen.
Yeah.
All right. Hopefully this is all visible.
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Anand and Zaid, for the opportunity, and thanks for the glowing words. It is very humbling to see that this cohort of experienced young emerging leaders, as you mentioned, Anand, who are hungry to learn more and know a lot more. Now, like I've done a few things. Certainly, I've been outside India for the last 23 years, but I've been fortunate to have engaged with the Indian market via Indian organizations I worked with. I cut my teeth with KPMG and Accenture in their strategy businesses, but after that, I spent time with Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Wipro, and now with Mindtree. So that has helped me remain in touch with the Indian ethos, the Indian business DNA as well. Nevertheless, there is always something to learn, I believe, and I'm looking forward to learning from this interaction as well. Now, since there are not a lot of participants, I thought if it is all right, I'd love to quickly have each of you just mention, your first name, the organization you work for, and what is your expectation from this session, so that I know where the goalposts are, and I don't keep rambling in a tangential direction. Maybe we could start with, I'll just go by the list that's popped up in Zoom. Shweta?
So my name is Shweta and I'm with SAP India. Expectation from this session is to learn from your experience and others' experience, because we see in a in one direction in a way we want to see, but I want to learn from others and see if I can apply whatever I learn in the role that I am in today.
Thank you, Shweta. Sorry to put you in the spot. I know must have been awkward. Just throw
Not a
random-
problem.
But if anything does come to mind later on, please feel welcome again to
Not a problem.
ask questions. Yeah. Okay. And then Sanoba.
Yeah, Sanobar, if you could go.
Hi, this is Sanobar Khwaja. I work for a company named Efficiently, which is a US-based startup. And I have recently been promoted to a lead, and I have like 2 people under me who's working as SaaS onboarding managers. So I'm a budding, lead, I would say. My goal was to learn how do I, engage with my team as well as build them so that we can deliver value for the customers. So that's what I'm looking for as in this role. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sanoba. Priya?
Yeah, hi. So I am Priya, based out of Bangalore, India. I work for a company called Sprinkler, and I handle product support here. So my objective of learning at starting of this program was to understand customer success and where support can help success, etc. So far, this has been a great experience in terms of understanding the wider role of what success does and how does it function, etc. Looking forward to today's session.
Thank you, Priya. Atul?
Yeah, hi. My name is Atul, and I work for CDP India. I was their first CSM, and not only do I take care of the CS, I do head the CS. Plus, I also take care of the project management and product management over there. So recently, I launched a product which was the first official Mumbai Metro application. So I also wanted, my whole purpose of joining this cohort was to have the enterprise and the organizations better understand that what is the difference between customer success and customer support and project management and product management. So just wanted to distinguish myself and for better opportunities moving forward.
Okay. Great. That's great. And Atul, I'm just curious. You mentioned you developed this app for Mumbai Metro. What does the app do?
Yatri, it's basically for Central Railways. For the Central Line, you can actually have the live location of trains in the entire region.
Okay, wonderful. So it's like something that will be used in the knock or the control room?
Yes, so basically anybody can use it. Like even anyone who's commuting to the local trains can use it. So it was launched on 13th of July. So we had a press conference and a huge launch, and it was the first official app of Central Railways.
Okay, wonderful, exciting. That's very, very cool. If there's a place we can look at it, I'd love to.
Absolutely.
Look at it. Thank you. And Santosh?
Hi, this is Santosh Thurat from Mumbai, and I work for SAP India in customer success role from last 5 years. And my objective for this whole course and the session is basically to, to learn a different perspective and how do we, achieve more success in the customer success role. And from today's session, of course, the stakeholder management is something which I would like to know more about.
Okay, sure. I think we can cover that very well. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Santosh. That's very, very clear and articulate. Yeah. Great. And Setu?
Yeah, Ashok, Sedu here. Leading customer success teams for India and MEA at Freshworks. So the objective of the session is to just know, what's the outside perspective in terms of the CS trends so that I can take it back to my team, right? So far it's been great. So looking forward to the session as well.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. And then we have Gaurav.
Hey, hi Ashok. Gaurav Shinde, currently working with SAP India as a customer success. uh, I joined this program with the objective of elevate myself in customer success role. What I'm looking from today's session is I want to understand the top three objectives or the vision or the goal of a CEO of any organization. In that stakeholder mapping, if we can cover that, that would be great. Any top three common objectives of any CEO?
Okay, okay. Can I ask why just the CEO?
I speak to CIO, CFO, CHRO, CPO. I know their objectives. I know. I'm lined up to them. What I am not having experience to dealing directly with the CEOs. So I want to understand some common objectives of CEOs. What is their focus? Never got a chance to speak with CEOs of the top strategic companies.
Mm, mm,
Mm,
mm.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Look, maybe, yeah, that is an interesting one because I know where you're coming from. Talking to CIOs is quite limiting. And most of the organizations in the IT world never look beyond the CIO. The quarterly or the biannual meeting they have with the CIO is basically, God blessing them with the presence. And they miss out on opportunities on the business side. But with the fast world, with cloud, with IT percolating into business, with low code, no code, the business writing code themselves, more and more business users are coming into the fold. The CEO, though, is an interesting one. The CEO is a bit removed from the rest because they also have their head in the boardroom. And, CEO basically has 3 or 4 additional objectives compared to other business stakeholders. So the CEO would, number one, potentially look at even selling the organization, selling units, buying units. Obviously, there is the market-facing part, projecting the results, the forecast, managing the media, managing any PR blow-ups. Often, organizations expect the CEO to be able to step forward should things go really pear-shaped. The CEO also has got other, below the surface responsibilities which don't occur on a day-to-day basis. So meeting with regulators, meeting with government functionaries, meeting with people who look after jurisdictions and the like. Now, not all of these will directly have a bearing on what you seek to do potentially in SAP, for example, unless they're looking at divesting a unit and you got to look at a divestiture initiative that may come out of it, where you have to then look at what to do with the golden copy of data, or if you're looking at an integration, a merger, then something similar. But typically the layer below the CEO or the layer adjacent to the CEO, like the MDs who run the retail business in a bank, who run corporate in a bank, or people who run the supply part, the asset management part, and the utility. These guys are very much closer. These business users are actually very important. They are more closer to initiatives that are budgeted, that are funded. They are often the exec sponsors of these initiatives within the organization. Tapping into them can give you much richer value. And I don't know how it is in India, but in Australia, for example, the focus is very heavy on the GM layer. The GMs are the ones in Australia who hold the budgets, who make the decisions, and the CXOs bless things. So they will give you an entry. If you know a CXO in an organization, you get a meeting with them, they will finally say, all right, I'll connect you to my GMs. But the GMs will make the call. And the GM in Australia, it's very rarely top down in Australia. It's top down and bottom up. So the GM will refer it to a head of. The head of might get his SME. They might kick the tires, poke the wheels, see if everything holds together. And then it bubbles back up and they say, look, I think there's something in here. Or they may say, look, our existing partners can do it as well, because whatever you're proposing, they may flick it to an existing partner if you're looking to penetrate the organization. So these guys can, go top down, bottom up, but it's really the GM layer which is the sweet spot, at least in Australia. And the GMs on the business side are the power brokers. They have the budget, the funding, and the like. But that's a quick comment to your aspiration to understand CEOs. We'll deep dive anyways, and during that discussion, please feel welcome. Now, Anand, I know you mentioned we seem to have a timeline of about 45 minutes to an hour. So please let me know if that is a hard stop. Then I will try and temper my content accordingly. If you're
no, that's fine, Ashok. Look, I think I think if we have questions and we have a good discussion going, I think we can continue as long as you're okay with it. I'm saying learners, I'm sure would be love to get more from you. So let's keep it open on that front. Yeah.
Sure. Fantastic. Okay. All right. So let's keep it interactive. Let's keep it learning oriented. So guys, look, we are looking at all the 4 topics we have mentioned. So without much ado, I'll jump into them. Now, look, by DNA, I am a consultant. I'm a problem solver. I started in the world after a very short stint in Wipro. I actually wasn't feeling like I was learning much, and I had an offer from KPMG, so I jumped ship and I learned all about IT strategy and engaged a lot with the CXOs and the GM layer in different organizations across India initially and then in Australia. So that gave me a bearing on how these people think, what are their insecurities, what are their challenges, often the politics that comes in as well. Sometimes board level plays as well that come in here. So that early exposure was quite handy, and my brief stint in Wipro before that, helped me start growing commercial teeth, if you might call it, because consultants, rarely have the ability to commercialize stuff as well as a good salesperson can do, to ask the customer to have a challenging discussion, to have a meaningful negotiation. So I was lucky to get the benefit of both of those. So what I've learned is a mishmash from all of those elements and across industries. So here is what I have seen, right? And please feel welcome to challenge me and let me know if you've seen otherwise, or if you want to dig deeper and understand a bit more. Now, look, in the world where I typically started, when I started with Wipro and when I was in KPMG, we were actually running IT strategies for the likes of Vaishya Bank in India. There was 100 crore RFP we had out there. Every major vendor worth their salt was bidding. And in those days, we saw, catalog-based selling was the big, ask and talk of the day. Clients also had to secure huge budgets. So it was CapEx heavy. Boards had to think about how they're going to bite the bullet and be able to invest in a major initiative. And then they would obviously look at ongoing costs for support and maintenance. But there were huge exit barriers once the relationship was signed. So there was a lot of emphasis on the decision making. But post the decision making part, right? When you look at the customer experience part, it was typically milestone led. Customer experience was not really a huge factor. Customers were sort of out there, left to discover things, left to raise issues, and it was often procurement driven. Procurement would basically police these relationships. Post sale, it was mostly support and services, and the commercial impact was very high at the point of sale. That's why there's a lot of focus. There was a lot of rigor around the selection, but ongoing, the commercial impact was not so high. You're basically renewing the support contract. The clients would whinge about the COLA part, or the changes in rates of support personnel, but that's about it. It was completely unbundled. And the partnerships, if at best, were there would be a prime, there would be a sub, like an IBM who would prime a large part of the deal or the entire deal, and bring in other vendors who would come in with equipment, who would come in with services. A Wipro would do the same in India. And they were often competitive as well. So sometimes, these primes would compete with the subs, and then there would be a landing, and the prime and the sub would make peace. The client would say, look, I love that guy's app, so your app is out, but you can take the whole deal and you can sub to so-and-so. So that is how, partnerships would be formed. Things have changed a lot in the last couple of decades, if we look at it. And Right now, offering is all about services. It's about experiences. Customer experience is a very, very critical part. Making sure the customer has a meaningful experience, customer gets value on an ongoing basis is really critical right now. And it's almost like looking at the streaming experience. So you've got the customer hooked. They can't have enough of your offering. They're finding value on an ongoing basis. They're solving new problems, consuming your offering. It becomes a very, very relevant part. Your stickiness keeps improving. So customer experience is important, and customers also walk away very quickly if the experience turns sour. So that puts a very heavy onus on the ongoing relationship. And the success of your own customer is important. It is important as to how they succeed with their customers. So if it's a bank where they're looking at the business banking part, the B2B part, it's very important that the end corporate who's consuming that business banking service has got a positive experience. If the customer loves the functional side or the responsiveness on the cloud, the ability to crunch data, but the corporate at the other end is very unhappy with the experience. Like Ariba, now it's improved, but about 5 or 6 years back, the experience was a huge issue, and customers would not hesitate to whinge, to look at other options, and the commercial impact was again limited at the point of sale because the exit barrier had reduced. And the relationship is very heavily consumption-led, which all of you are very acutely aware of. You're aware of churn, you're aware of predictive indicators which could drive churn. You've got analytics engines which tell you, that here are 2 or 3 correlated factors which are saying that, hey, look, customer hasn't logged in enough time, so they're likely to pull out. So let's go meet them on the front foot and say, look, you've got a few hero users, you've got some leaders in there, but yeah, let's talk to the laggards. Let's help them utilize my offering better. So customer impact on an ongoing basis is very, very important. And partnerships are becoming more and more one-on-one collaborations, especially when you're looking at the PaaS space. Your partnership with, say, the hyperscaler, your partnership with the consulting partner, the services partner, the SIs, it becomes more cooperative. Right, you do compete for the overlaps, but it very quickly settles down, and the engagement thereon is very important for it to make it work. Now, what about the future? Where is this all going? If you join the dots and try and extend the chewing gum, right, where is this exactly going to go forward? Now, nobody can tell for sure, but if one looks at a Maslow-like hierarchy, right, at the very basic level, there was the part about getting the I don't know if I should say, but roti kapdi kapda makan type scenario, right? But once you have done that, then the experience part comes in. So the hygiene is out. Now customers are more experience focused. I think the future is all about customer actualization. So customers have their visions, their missions. They want to be seen as important parts of the ecosystems they survive in. So sustainability, being seen as ethical organizations, being seen as giving back to their own stakeholders. Those things are becoming incredibly important to customers. The for-profit organization remains for profit, but there are other objectives which are becoming equally important, and their customers are holding them accountable to it. There are organizations which are pulling out of their corporate banking partners, saying so and so bank actually funded something which was not very acceptable ethically. So there was a large Australian bank which got caught out because they found that there were some dodgy transactions which were being channeled through their channels. The bank was completely unaware, not their fault, but it was their governance which got called out, because the transactions were used to fund some very nefarious activities in the Philippines, and that called them out. There was inquiries in them, and a number of customers said, we don't want to be dealing with this organization. So that is why organizations are more and more looking to become actualized, become proud parts of their societies. And I think it's important that as a customer service exec, you actually help them, you partner with them, you lead that sort of thinking. Many times your organization would have led it. Some of you come from large global organizations. Many of you come from brand new Gen Y style organizations or Gen Z type organizations, which are inventing the code here, and the customers want to learn from you. So very quickly, you'll find customers are looking to, pick lessons or leaves from your books to put it in their, hymn books. Now, again, customer experience, I think in the future will have very strong real-time impacts. It would be almost transactional. Clients will be able to pull back in very quickly. Like a simple example as an individual is Office 365 versus, Google Office. People can lift and shift very quickly if they find that the experience is not working well, or if they find that there is an impact on their device, or they're just making some other technology choices which make it more relevant for them to use another product, a competing product. In terms of the longer term post-sale relationship, I think besides looking at the customer, there will be an ecosystem orchestration skill which is going to become more and more important. So like you would bring together multiple partners now to work with a customer. You would potentially work with other partners for your customer. So you would bring in customers and their peer organizations to actually offer an experience to the ecosystem they are in, to their joint customers. So that ecosystem orchestration, I think, is going to become a more and more important relevant skill, which will basically challenge most customer success players to go to the next level. There are examples now which you can see as well. But as you go forward, these will slowly start becoming the norms to be successful. I touched upon transactional relationships. I touched upon, microtransactions is what might likely also drive commercial impact. Customers would basically be able to enter and exit their stakeholders, right? Like, for example, you've got more and more fintech apps which are coming in, which are completely overlaying the banks behind them. And as a result, people don't even need bank accounts these days. So how are the banks going to function in such a play? What are the microtransaction plays that the bank is going to be able to have to still be relevant in this world? Risk and gain sharing, I think, is going to be an important part as well. So sharing the risk, sharing the gains with your customers. So customers start seeing you as an important partner in the relationship, not just somebody who offers a service and gets paid for it, but somebody who actually comes to them with new opportunities, invests in those opportunities, and thereon, jointly takes the benefit. So for example, we met a large grocery retail chain here in Australia, and we said, look, we can help you change the customer experience. We can look at new opportunities for innovation. We can help you revise your business model for some of your lines. And the customer turned around and said, look, that sounds really exciting. Why don't you come and tell me that there is A, B, and C play that you guys can engage in that will give me $500 million of benefit. And you can take 10% of it, but you will invest in getting that benefit, right? So the customer certainly is looking at partnership. It's looking at saying, you take on a lot of the risk. You're saying it's innovation. Fine. If it's something that's out there, which you're not sure of, I'm not sure of, why should I put my bet on it? You should put your skin in the game as well. So that is going to become more and more the norm. And I think over time, it might essentially become a membership model as well. I mean, you see some examples in other industries, right? Like Star Alliance, for example. No airline can afford to cover the globe end to end. So you've got One World and Star Alliance, where airlines come in as members and they benefit from a combined customer base. They're able to share loyalty programs. So those kind of models will start percolating into the technology space. So that is what, to my mind, seems to be the future. That is where I see initial tentative conversations happening with customers. There are some examples as well in the technology industry, as well as other industries, where we are cross-pollinating for. So that's really a quick overview of what we see the trends evolving and where they are going. Any questions, any comments, anything to share?
Yes, Shweta, you want to ask something?
Yeah, so just while these are very relevant points and do see a shift towards this, but there's a dichotomy that we see in the Indian market particularly. There are few customers who have moved to the value aspect while the others still remain where they are. Procurement still holds the budget, procurement still has the say in everything. I am dealing with a lot of partners today, wherein we are working closely with the or aligned with the business stakeholders. Uh, they want to forge ahead, they want to buy more, but it is the procurement that plays a devil's advocate and kills the whole thing. Uh, and given that not only see in the cloud world, the partner also started playing a very critical role. While experience is very important, the partner is the one who delivers the experience in terms of when they are deploying it. For products like Ariba, you mentioned, these are not quick fix apps. You take time to deliver, and then it takes time to get some value out of the system. So now the partners, the kind of partners you're engaging with, I think most of the time the CSMs are losing time just fixing the problems that the partners have done. I have multiple accounts where I've seen first the partner deployed bad and the support is far worse. So first they just dug the grave, then they push the customer into that grave. That is the kind of scenario we see. So the world is becoming very complex. Experience is becoming critical, but then there are customers who still hold their traditional views, wherein they do not want the value to get the even to sign up for a value, a scorecard. Uh, you might get them on with great difficulty, you might get them there, but I don't see them implementing it, using it, monitoring it, because the data has to come from the customer ultimately. The quarterly business reviews have to have happen with them, that they you go on the call but they don't turn up. So that shift is very little that I see. Very few customers come with that mindset, and I'm blessed when I have a few customers like that. But the larger part of the customer base is still holding on to its belief that deployment ho gaya, sab theek ho gaya. But that's not the case with the cloud world. So in this scenario, how do you manage the stakeholders in a scenario wherein you are trying to talk to the CFO, you're talking to the CPO, you're trying to reach out to the CIO, but then they come with this mindset where which is not value driven. How do you push or forge ahead? How do you engage with such stakeholders? And given the bigger challenge becomes is when you go and talk to them, the partners, there is a problem that's already on the table, which leads to the SRER side of it. How do you handle that? How do you drive it back to tell them that this is where you should focus on?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Shweta, and it's very grounded in reality. Look, there is no dancing around this fact that there are organizations which will always remain in more traditional frames of working. So in cases you will find, maybe in many cases, you will find that there are many organizations who are still working in the column that we have listed as the past. It may be very much the present, and it may be the foreseeable future in those organizations. And the rules of the game change when you are operating in each of these columns. The style of engagement changes. And this depends on the maturity of key people in that customer, as well as the ability of the CSM to be able to engage and partner with these people. The goal is not to move the customer up in maturity. You can't do that single-handedly to move an entire organization forward. But what you do is you operate with them. So, for example, during a major selection process, a bank kept asking us, what is your DNA? What is your organization's DNA? This was one of the major banks in Australia, and I was in Infosys at the time, and they were looking to award us the deal. They did give us the deal, but they kept wanting to understand the DNA. And at that point, I didn't understand what they meant by the DNA. We had tons of PowerPoints, we had tons of slides, we had all of the corporate marketing stuff to talk about, but the client kept tapping they kept meeting our execs, they kept meeting our agents on the ground, they kept talking to people at junior levels, they talk to people who would engage with their junior people down the line. And they came up with 2 or 3 things. One of the things the EGM procurement came and told me later on is, look, I see a very strong ethical bone in your organization, which is very, very important to us. The other bit is that while all Indian organizations are excellent in responsiveness to customers, there is a bit of a subservience, which all of you are plagued by. You need to stand up and partner better. But nevertheless, what we see is that you are still politely able to, push back at us. The other DNA which you could improve, and that's something we all Indian organizations here get, is you're fantastic order takers, but we don't want order takers. We want people who will teach us. So the key, Shweta, that I'm trying to get to is that you will need to adapt to the organization that you're in. And the key again there is the human factor, which is that you align with the right people and you align with driving the right agendas. Again, with the partner as well, I think it's important that you assert yourself in the right way with the partner, get the message out right. So let's park the human factor for a bit, because we have a section on stakeholder management where we can look at that in more detail. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so
We can move to the next slide, Ashok.
yeah, sure. Okay. So look, more food for thought, right? And this is what we are seeing in markets which are obviously, I won't say more advanced than India, but culturally different than India, because India is extremely advanced in there are organizations which are doing amazing things with the cloud, and some clients here are looking for Indian examples to learn from. So this is not really to say more advanced markets, but I think more evolved customer behaviors. So look, Cloud 1.0 was all about move to the cloud. So the big wave is sort of in midstream, but it's ultimately going to decline. Cloud 2.0 is looking at business-led transformation, because many customers who have moved to the cloud are saying, hey, this is not a cost play. We're not saving as much as we thought. Some are actually going back to their DCs and going back to prem. And then there is the end customer led play, which is, I think, where the big game is. So there are multiple sources which call out the benefit. And I think customers need to be migrated towards understanding how the cloud move or move to PaaS will connect them to be able to give better experiences to their end customers, to their B2C customers, how their operating models themselves will become more elastic, how they can actually deliver new customer journeys much more quickly, how they can launch products much more quickly, how their time to market is going to be much lower. So the cloud 2.0 to 3.0 challenge is, I think, some food for thought. COVID itself has changed the rules of the game. It has obviously put video as a major mode, but the rules keep changing. Like in Australia right now, we've suddenly found a spurt in cases. Now, in a highly vaccinated population, it's not a huge issue, except that there has been a spurt in hospitalizations, there's been a spurt in ICU admissions, and there's a spurt in deaths. So that has now got a number of organizations who are pushing people to come back into work, saying, look, hang on, operate from home. They're looking at bringing a mask mandate back in. So those questions are coming in, and obviously, elections are an important factor. So when elections are too close, politicians don't want to be seen as big brother. But the impact for the organization is the rules change very fast. So the way you engage, even now, to my mind, human engagement is the strongest and best connection you can build. Nothing beats face to face. But video is now, really good if you know the person well. Once you have formed the relationship, video is also quite relevant. So when you engage with people, when you have confidential conversations, people are not going to be as comfortable giving you confidential information, which may be useful to you, but may be difficult for them to share over a video call very easily. So how do you engage with that? So post-COVID, the rules are going to change. There are many organizations which are incredibly focused on working from home. Do go and meet the customer near their home, instead of the meeting room meetings. Do you operate from cafes and you sort of drift around interacting with people? So that post-COVID is another food for thought that we are seeing in terms of managing customer relationships. And the skill mix, right? And there's a whole section in the end where we're looking at customer success skills. But what we're seeing in organizations is they're moving away from the dedicated employee model. Australia at least has anyways had a huge percolation of contractors. There are many people, a large proportion of the workforce is actually contractors. Permanents are just as risk at losing their positions as contractors are. But organizations try to make people permanent because the cost to go becomes a little bit lower. And then you've got these virtual humans, right? Bots percolating in there. So the skill mix is changing. You may find that elements of procurement are now, bot driven. Analytics engines might be crunching a lot of information. So how do you go and provide a human factor in there? How do you go and provide a touchy-feely relationship element? How do you put experience in when a bot is sitting at the other end? Potentially, there is an AI engine crunching information. And then the other part is organizations are also looking at how work is done. So more and more a mantra that seems to percolate here and there is you try and eliminate work as much as possible. You re-engineer the process, you take out work, you push things to self-service. Whatever is left, you try and automate as much as possible, and the rest is sent to the crowd, right? So more and more crowdsourcing is becoming a big play because resources, skills are at a huge premium. Great people with the right skills are expensive, hard to get, and even harder to keep engaged. And there are crowdsourcing engines like one we used in Wipro was called Top Coder. And there are people, about 1.82 million people registered on it, working all over from Brazil, Russia, India, Australia, the US. And you could create a UI interface within 48 hours. You would get 6 designs in 48 hours. You just choose the top 2 and you pay money as part of a contest to the top 2. So the budgets of organizations shrank. For a UI concept, typically a client would want to pay about 200,000, have a team engaged, a team of 3 engaged for about 3 months, multiple concepts, wireframes, detailed wireframes, and then you finally have a view of what it would look like. But here, bang, in 48 hours, you've got 6 concepts. You pay $10,000 to the winner, you pay $6,000 to the second. You can even tell them to make multiple changes, and then you have to then contextualize it and put it back on your portal. So the skill mix, the crowd is becoming an extremely interesting lever for organizations who are finding it difficult to get specialized skills and even to retain those skills, or too expensive to have that skill sitting in their roles. So that is what we have been seeing. But keen to hear, from India, what you are seeing. What is it that is interesting or game changing? Obviously, there is the traditional, which is difficult. You have to cut hard rock to get those organizations to move. But what are the newer organizations seeing? Like you've got the people from Freshworks and the like, from Efficiently, Sprinkler. What are you guys seeing?
Setu, any comments?
Yeah, so what we are seeing right now is the deployments are being faster, Ashok. Same way customers have become agile, most of them. And during the pandemic, I think we ended up selling more bots and chat customers. The reason being, customers wanted to change quickly because of the end user behavior, right? So that got evolved over the time. And customers wanted to really come back and just try and innovate new things in terms of, just getting bots live on WhatsApp, bots live on Instagram, and all these digital channels, right? So that's exactly what we saw. And whatever you were saying, it's connecting well, right? So yeah, that's the observation from inside.
Okay, thank you, Setu.
Yeah, similarly, like in Sprinkler, we saw how CCaaS has suddenly taken up, by banks and contact centers post-COVID.
That's right. Automation is becoming a big play, right? And technology adoption. I think the big change management challenge most organizations faced was the tech was there, You could run change management with your employee base, but running change management with your customer base was very hard. Even here in Australia with a large aging population, people were very reliant on talking to a human at the other end. Initially, there was the challenge that they wanted to hear Aussie accents, and then finally they got comfortable talking to people in India and the Philippines, but they still wanted a human. And suddenly with India, Philippines going into lockdown, many organizations like Telstra seized the opportunity and just pushed forward self-service portals and initiatives, which drove that change on the customer end as well. And customers too became much more amenable. I mean, banks, people said, look, I don't need to go and see a teller every time. Grannies were learning to operate their banking apps on their phone, making sure they could do it securely, of course. So yes, I think that's been a big driver, the COVID-driven elements which have brought in all kinds of change. So look, I'll keep moving. Now, in terms of the customer challenge, right? I think as you get closer to customers, and this is something which we did all the time in consulting, of course, which is to be problem solvers. But the key is that more and more customers are saying, look, we don't want order takers. There are some customers who obviously say, look, pipe down, I'm the buyer, you're the seller. I will tell you what I want, you go and deliver it. So that's your job. And that kind of constituency will still remain for some time at least. But if you look at customers who are more amenable, and especially where you want to become important to the customer's agenda, it's very important that you become an advisor to the customer, you become a trusted advisor, you become a problem solver. And the more, higher EQ customers will say, look, you are dealing with a number of organizations like mine. What are you seeing them do? What are you seeing that is working well for them? Can you advise me? Right? So there is the cut and paste part where you can just say, hey, look, I'm seeing 3 other banks doing this, or I'm seeing 1 or 2 retailers who are trying these experiments. You want to give it a go, we can create a sandbox for you. So that element is there. But I think if you want to rise higher up the agenda, and I think Gaurav mentioned you want to get close to the CEO, right? The important part is you need to then start looking at breaking down their problem very, very well. And there is multiple levels of depth you can go into, but at a very basic level, here are a few things to think about. And most people stop with the clinical element, which is looking at the stated versus unstated challenges, looking at the needs versus wants. So you've got to be extremely good at listening. Your listening skills have to be evolved to the point where you're not listening to reply back, just politely nodding your head and saying, I've got my 3 bullet points and I'm going to hit them back, but really mull over what they're talking about, really also feel the emotion underneath what they're talking about, right? Empathy is a very, very important part of that listening skill. So that unstated challenges that they're finding, your ability to probe and give shape to those challenges, also to be able to filter out the chaff from the grain, to be able to understand what are the wants, what are the good to haves versus what is truly needed by the customer. Right. In one of the consulting firms I worked with, much younger in my days, I met a customer and I said, look, came back and said, look, this is exactly what the customer wants. I've done my inquiry. And the partner turned around and said, look, the customer doesn't know. The customer is sitting in their organization. They are only looking at what their challenges are. They're only looking at the 4 walls within their organization, but we see the whole industry. And I can tell you that this is exactly what the customer needs. There was an element of deregulation coming in the utilities business in Australia, and customers did not even realize what was needed. But because we had teams working in the UK, which had worked closely with a deregulated utilities market, we could get that input out. And we said, look, here is a need which the customers here don't even know is needed, right? We had to go and explain to them that you need a platform of a certain kind, which will help all utilities potentially to talk to each other. Earlier, utilities were always competing, but this deregulation made it necessary. So that kind of element, that kind of knowledge of the domain is going to be helpful, or even talking to one customer, understanding the domain, and then when you have a conversation with another customer in the same industry, you can be that much more smarter in that element. understanding the customer's customer, right? Understanding the B2B buyer or the B2C consumer. What are the needs, the wants, the challenges? Where are the trends going? Where is the real business value? Where is the innovation coming? What are the examples you can think of, right? So these kind of elements become very useful to clinically break down the problem, to understand where the areas of opportunity lie. But very important is the other two, which have become very important these days, especially. They were not so important, say 5, and definitely very less in importance 10 years ago. Was the ecosystem important impact? Looking at the value that the organization is giving back to the community they are in, looking at sustainability, because many organizations are finding that their customers are walking away if they don't tick these two boxes convincingly. Looking at the human and social drivers. So understanding the individuals that you're dealing with, right? Understanding the culture of the organization you're working with, understanding the beliefs of the organization. So I mentioned understanding the DNA of your organization, understanding the DNA of your customer's organization. So for example, one client we had was a completely privately owned company. The family owned it, billion-dollar organization, not listed, financials are not known, and very different set of beliefs in that organization. They looked at having their employees for very long periods of time. They had, on weekends, the employees would meet almost as if they were an extension of the family. And these people were not so interested in learning about other organizations. And their idea was, when they had to buy anything, was to drive it entirely through the procurement mechanism. Procurement was a vicious engine in that organization. And moment we said we are working with this client, the other client would say, "Look, you have my sympathies." So you need to understand what drives this organization and what is important to them. If it is a procurement-led organization, then don't worry too much about the extra value add. Don't worry too much about the experience. Those are important, but ultimately these guys are really going to look for apples to apples comparison to get the best possible price. And then they may even want you to shave the skin off the apple and give them a discount because there's no nutritional value in that skin. So look, it's important to be able to frame that customer challenge extremely well. The challenge will also change with the level of the customer you're working with. So organizations may see a different level of challenge with a different level of seniority of the stakeholder. So for example, we sold the first consumption-based HR solution for Infosys globally here in Australia for one of the large banking and insurance clients. And this organization had just bought a large insurer. Now, the organization they bought, the insurer that they bought, had about 28 brands, and each brand was run like a separate P&L. They had their own payroll, they had their own HR system, and the main client who had bought this organization had got a legacy HR system as well. So when we went and sold this BPaaS to them, the messaging was completely different. To the people on the ground, we said, look, managers can actually have integrated teams from both organizations coming under them. Now, in your current system, they can't even see leave plans of some of their employees. They can't even understand how to run the performance appraisals of these employees who are coming in from the acquired entity, right? And that was what worked well at the manager and possibly at the general manager level. The GM and above level, the CXOs were pretty pleased that we could unify them. We could give them one linear way to dashboard and report on the metrics. They could drive the organization much better. They could drive the processes much better. Their ability to change the processes, their ability to roll out a unified process across their complete organization was much better. They could even break down the silos in the acquired organization that I mentioned. And the board said, hang on, you're giving us post-merger integration free of cost, right? You're putting all the employees on one unified HR platform. Otherwise, we would have to hire a strategy consulting firm. They would go through the roles, they would go through all kinds of change management. But here we're getting it done in one go. So in a consumption-based model, we're getting this all on in one go, right? So the messaging of your offering has to change. The problem solving will also be different at different levels in the organization. So the solution that you will articulate to different layers in the organization will change. Now, coming to the right-hand side, right, there are multiple tools and techniques to do this. Each one is a school of thought in itself. Issue tree mapping or fishbone diagramming, those techniques I'm sure you're familiar with. They're quite common and good handy techniques to get started with. Try and have a notepad, try and start playing around with clients' problems and try and use these techniques to get yourself started. But if you want something more sophisticated, there is a publication called Spin Selling. There are two parts to it. There is a blue book, which has got very strong research, which talks about successful versus unsuccessful salespeople. And it breaks down a lot of myths about selling. So for example, in many sales trainings, I had been taught that open-ended questions are better than close-ended questions. Talking in a meeting, has to be done for a certain period of time. The sales guy has to be liked by the client. You need to go and have drinks with the client. You need to go out and socialize with the client, invite each other to your baby's naming ceremonies and all that. But all the research basically said that open-ended versus close-ended doesn't matter. Salespeople who use either heavily are equally successful or unsuccessful, right? Their ability, their likability was not as important a factor as well. They found that customers were buying from people where they saw value once they understood where that value was coming from. So the common myth that every sales guy should have a terrible liver and be able to manage a lot of drinky nights breaks down very fast when you look at that research. It's very compelling. I think they looked at about 40,000 sales calls with hundreds of salespeople who they accompany to these sales calls. They use very strong metrics to be able to get a yes/no response. So the blue book is interesting. That tells you about the whole logic. It tells you about where the real value of selling is. And then they've got another red book called the field book of Spin Selling, which helps you actually plan for meetings. And all it does is it says, and spin is actually an acronym. So spin is not, like media spinning as is popularly called. So spin is actually an acronym for the sales process. And what you do there is you basically uncover problems that the client is vaguely aware of. You understand the extent of the problem. You understand the extent of the pain. You understand the cost of that problem. You understand the benefit of solving that problem. And you actually make that pain, that cost, that benefit known to the client in the meeting. The field book is incredibly valuable. It's used by, some of the leading tier 1 SIs. It's used by the top end consulting firms. So this technique is incredible. And I would, if you haven't come across it, I would strongly recommend taking a look at it and getting yourself a copy. If you can get yourself into the training, even better. Kepner-Trego, that's a problem-solving methodology. It's a very simple, logical method. Get hold of the book, have a look at it. It's brilliant at helping you get to root causes of problems. So that's a technique which often some B schools even teach. So think about it. Active listening, again, very important to draw out the emotion. Very important to draw out the pain. Very important to have empathy. It's also not just useful for problem framing, but it's also useful for building great relationships, building better engagement, building a shared vision with your customers. So, wherever you can pick up nuggets on active listening, it's an ongoing school of thought because even now, for example, after, 2.5 decades of work, I'm learning to listen better on video. Because it's a completely different school of thought where you're trying to extricate emotion from the client on the other side and form a bond. Design thinking is obviously one of the very new kids on the block. Incredible value, incredibly pragmatic and practical. So there is not a huge pregnant pause before you actually get to value. Design thinking actually delivers outcomes pretty fast. And it's not about getting anything 100% right. It's about learning fast, iterating, and getting there. A pyramid principle is really about articulation. So that's a book by Barbara Minto. It's less about problem solving, but it's about articulating the problem and then the solution. So these are just a few nuggets I thought I'll share with you, and obviously I've given you a quick overview of what they stand for and mean. But each one of them could demand a few sessions to really become good at. So again, I'll pause here. Any questions before I keep moving?
Guys, feel free to ask, speak up, whatever you've seen, you've experienced.
No problem, Zed. I think we'll keep going. I'll just keep a small pause and we'll keep going. If questions come in anytime, just raise your hand, let me know, or I think Zed can see the raised hands. I can't because I'm presenting, but
I can. I will pull out.
Ashok, one question. You mentioned about the unstated challenges.
Hmm.
So for that, I mean, you need to develop a good rapport with the stakeholders so that when you talk to them, they open up, and in between, you need to understand in between the lines. So this is quite a time consuming process. It doesn't within a period of 1 year to get to that unstated challenge. Do you see that as a possibility because your subscriptions are up for renewal and all of that within a year? So how do you get to the unstated challenges?
Okay, look, you don't have to tick every box in this, right? There are situations where things are relevant, and I like the tone of the question, Shweta, because you have got a very strong commercial filter at the end of it, because ultimately, we are all rewarded for the commercial outcomes we deliver. So if you do something because it is exciting, it's complex, it's challenging, but there is a very limited commercial outcome to your organization, it impacts the reward. So look, in terms of unstated challenges, coming back to it, I think there are techniques like design thinking, which can unravel those challenges, extremely easily. Let me give you an example. In Wipro, we had bought a firm called Design It, which specialized in industrial design and design thinking, and they specialized. They had social psychologists, they had ethnographers, all using design thinking to extricate unknown problems. So, for example, there was a client called GN Resound, which engaged us, and they basically made hearing aids. So when the designers went in and interviewed people who used the hearing aids, people who had hearing challenges, they said, look, what is the challenge with using a hearing aid? Why don't you use a hearing aid, right? Now, there were people saying, look, we don't use your hearing aid because of sound quality. The engineers were all about sound quality. The engineers were saying, look, it's all about clarity. The finance guys were saying, or the sales guys were saying, we need to make them cheaper so people can buy more of our hearing aids and the like. And there were others who were talking about serviceability. The support guys were saying, look, they need to be serviceable. That's how you build a better hearing aid. So the team was confused. The client team was confused as to where to put their money. The product team wasn't sure, whether to improve sound quality or put it in serviceability or to put it in something else. Now, what Design It did was they said, look, hang on, let's not talk to the client's employees. We'll talk to people who are going to buy the device. We talk to people who are hard of hearing. And when they ran these focus groups, basically it became very clear that people are embarrassed to wear hearing aids. People are not embarrassed to wear glasses for some reason, but when they have hearing aids, people who wear those are extremely embarrassed. And they said that, look, the problem with these hearing aids is that when I'm outside in watching my kids play sport, there's a lot of background noise. I go to a cafe, there is a lot of echo. I'm in a quiet meeting room, it's super quiet. Now, what happens is when I go to each of these locations, I adjust my hearing aid. I increase or decrease the volume, I increase the frame. And moment I do that, the game is up. So no matter how discreet your hearing aid, there are hearing aids which are practically invisible. But moment they reach out behind the ear and twiddle with the device, they feel very embarrassed. They feel the game is up. Somebody notices, somebody, maybe they feel somebody notices, right? So all that it meant was that we had to build an app on people's phones And what happened was when they moved location and they needed to adjust their hearing aid, they would actually discreetly open the app. They would just make an adjustment to the settings. So suddenly the setting would be conference room to sporting arena to cafe to supermarket, and the device would change. And then the designer said, let's have some fun. We'll go a little bit further. So they basically said, if you're sitting in a long meeting room and you're at one end, you can't hear what people at the other end are saying, you just activate your phone and you slide it to the other end of the meeting room. And the phone will actually pick up what people at the other end of the table are saying. So it becomes an extended ear, right? I had a colleague who had that hearing aid and he would leave his phone in meeting rooms and not really walk out and come back and say, I heard what you guys were talking about, about me. So suddenly the people who had hearing problems had a superpower, right? They could hear in rooms where they weren't physically present, or they could hear dialogues where most people with normal hearing couldn't hear. So we had uncovered an unstated challenge and we had commercialized it, and that had boosted the sales of the hearing aid, right? So this was focused on the end customer, the actual consumer, rather than focusing on the clients, people telling you all kinds of stuff, and solving an unstated challenge, finding an opportunity, driving innovation, right? So how does that help you get an idea, Shweta?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, basically, one needs to get a little creative about it, figure out where you can get the info, find that audience, and start following up with them. That's the key element of the unwanted, unstated challenges.
That's
Knowing the
absolutely right. And look at the third bullet point, the customer's customer. That's a key game changer. Many customers who want to keep you on the IT side, they say, don't talk to business. And it used to be a win for us when the business engaged with us, the CHRO, the CFO engaged with us, the COO engaged, their people. We said, hang on, we're talking to the business. This is very cool. And the IT guys would get nervous saying, what did my internal customer tell you? I want to be in the meeting. The procurement guy would completely lose it because they're losing control on the process. So we were very happy talking to the business. But the game changer was when we started talking to the end customer who actually consumes or buys the company's product, your customer's product. And that is where the priceless insights come, because when you crunch that data, when you go below the layers, you look at unmet needs, you actually find golden opportunities for your customer to capitalize. And when their business grows or booms, obviously, you get a ticket to the dance. So that's an important part. So that's an example. I'll keep moving in the interest of time. Surely we can talk about more such examples. Now, look, this is a very simple template, right? And again, the key is to have something like this in your notepad, and then look at how the challenge sort of maps out. So you could, you can look at how the challenge is impacting the business in the customer side, how people are getting impacted, from a technology perspective, right? There might be multiple technology consumers. I've blown up technology a bit because we all, start from that end of town. But the infra team versus the data team versus the guys who do the customer journey plumbing, like, the Adobe team, the process orchestration or the workflow team, the Pega guys. Each of these guys will have different sets of challenges, right? Each of these consumers. Finance will have an interesting perspective, legal will have an interesting perspective, and often people ignore those when they define the solution. And then come finance, come legal, some jurisdictional issue could actually break down the solution that you're building very fast. So that's why for completeness, you must look at all of those elements on the sides as well to be able to summarize the challenge. And like I gave you the example of the client who had brought this large insurer, seniority also changes perspective of the problem. The board was really worried about integrating this organization, and our BPAS, just gave them post-merger integration. Whereas the managers on the ground were really saying, look, I need to be able to see my entire team's leave plans in one go. And that was a big win for them. So the solution, again, will change. The articulation of the solution will change to different people as well. And the capability where that solution will come from, could be from different places. Now, the reason I put in capability sources is because the world today needs us to have higher EQ in the way we engage with customers. Many organizations always go in and say, look, here I am, and I'm going to solve your problem. more and more we realize that most organizations can't do everything, and those who can do everything are not good at everything. So it makes sense to actually partner with other organizations, partner with stakeholders inside the customer where there is capability. Like, for example, many large SIs still believe in hiring domain consultants. They said, look, I need a domain consultant to sit in front of my banking customer and look intelligent. I need a domain consultant to, come to my retail customer and talk about supply chains and stock levels. But truth be told, the customer has been running their business for decades. They are the experts. Unless your domain guy comes in with input from multiple sources, the customer has some expertise, which is very important. In many of our digital engagements, we basically have the customer's PO actually driving the engagement for a reason. I mean, Agile is productive not just because they're delivering things faster, but because the head of the beast is actually the customer's entity who is dealing with their end consumers. So that piece of expertise is important. So the key to problem solving, or to solving the, defining the solution, is to bring in all these stakeholders and orchestrate them constructively so that the end solution is compelling. And then getting into cost, solution delivery, of course, that's when you get your delivery partners, your SIs involved. Defining a clear RACI becomes very, very important. Risks and mitigation. Again, each of these layers can become a science in itself, and the key is not to get lost. It's to have a one-page simple view. If you've got a significant opportunity in your customer, understand what is the challenge you're looking to solve. What does the challenge mean to different people in different parts of the organization? What is the solution that is relevant to each of those people? Where is the capability going to come for each of those components? Now, again, the columns I put in, they could change. They may not necessarily be business people, tech and finance and legal. It could be the board. It could be the CEO. It could be the CXOs below the CEO, and going all the way down to managers, people who are actually making decisions. So the columns could change, right? It's the rows that are more important. But if you've got something like this dynamically running for major initiatives for each of your customers, it will give you that clarity. And each time you learn something, you can go back and refine this. And that becomes a big tool for you to uplift yourself to become problem solvers rather than order takers in customer relationships. Does anyone have any experience doing this with your customers? Have you got any stories to share? Okay, I'll keep moving.
Ashok, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, how do we implement this in, like, what is the mindset that we have when we sort of fill in this data, this sheet? So is it individual customers are we looking at, or is it like a holistic approach?
Look, this comes from initially from listening really well. And when I mentioned, if you look at the clinical elements part, right? Looking at the stated, the unstated challenges, looking at active listening, looking at building trust-based relationships. So people actually tell you what are the challenges they face. It's about drawing that information out and organizing that as a stated problem, and then breaking the problem down by stakeholder, and then identifying a solution. So this is not something you would put in a CRM, for example. When you mentioned implementing it, it's not a valid process, right? It's something which you would keep as a tool in your back pocket to become that much more effective. Sanu, if I remember right, you mentioned you got 2 people under you who have come in and you want to engage better with your team. So sometimes you can deploy your team to have these conversations with multiple people. So you fan out, you collect information, you collect intelligence, and you keep contributing and making this relevant. So you guys have a very clear view of the customer's problem. Once you do this effectively, what's going to happen is customers will start looking to you, because there are very few people in the customer's organization who are having conversations across all these layers. There are very few people, I can tell you. So you become a wellspring of knowledge, and customers then look to you saying, hang on, what did the HR guys tell you about this? Why is this a problem from a finance perspective? Tell me again. And so you become that much more knowledgeable. You become that much more of a partner and a trusted advisor. So that's the reason behind doing this exercise, if that helps, Sanada.
Makes sense. Thank you.
So Ashok, with regards to what you just shared, if you go one step back,
Yeah.
uh, this is something not exactly this way, but I do maintain something similar because when you hear a summary or a challenge summary that this is the problem where I have invested resources with the kind of solution I provide, I keep a repository in an Excel sheet. Whereas I may not put business in info, but I know this person came up with this problem, and there's something similar that I maintain and who delivered, etc. So that when we have a conversation with the key stakeholders, we know what we have done and what is it we have done. So the kind of investment we made. Otherwise, you tend to forget what you've done to solve the problem. What was the kind of investment you made internally? A few of these line items definitely are captured that, if not all of it. But then there is a rough framework that I didn't know it exactly fit this way in the scheme, but then I do maintain something of this similar to go back and show the customer at some point when they keep challenging us, what is it that you are doing? And these were your multiple problems at an operational level, and this is the kind of investment we've been making. And this is the solution we provide. So 3-4 lines, definitely I keep a repository of it.
That's very good, Shweta. And look, there is no hard and fast rule. This is illustrative. This is one way to do it. Do what works well for you and works well for your clients, what works well for your organization, the offering. The key is to have this somewhere. The key is to have it simple. The key is to have it referenceable. You could put it in your account dossier, your account plan. It doesn't need to be war and peace by itself. But when your execs want to understand your client situation very quickly, this could be an additional input that you can provide them and say, look, from all the conversations we have had, this is what we are hearing about the same situation, but from multiple perspectives. And this is what the solution might potentially look like, right? And if you have to do something which is compelling, then you have to bring in multiple sources of capability to bring it, and we'll have to orchestrate them. So that elevates you to become not just the right partner for your customer, but even gives you the right respect and helps you actually orchestrate your organization. You may have a better view of how to leverage your CXOs versus your directs versus say your solution team. So you become a better orchestration. So even doing this on a piece of paper and putting it, sticking it to your wall in front of your desk at home is enough. But the goal is to keep that problem solver frame in mind. That's the ticket to actually elevating your role from being, a glorified, order taker who is dedicated on demand to the customers and who just comes in, hands over an invoice, or emails it, or however your billing system operates, and then collects your money and you're gone, right? Then your relevance goes down. Your seat at the table slowly disappears. Everything gets automated, and your client is now open and vulnerable for competitors who are able to talk like this, or act like this, and potentially influence them better. All right, so I'll keep moving. So stakeholder management, right? Now, look, the key thing here is to look at how different individuals in the organization need to be managed. Now, people tend to focus on decibel. Right now, for illustrative purposes, I said the highest decibel person has the least influence, has got the lowest impact, but is the loudest mouth in the organization. So understanding the actual power of the individual. So for example, A is the exec, right? It could be possibly the CEO, or it could be the CFO. A huge amount of power could block things, could blow them apart. Doesn't really get much benefit, doesn't really get much impact from the initiative that you might be driving. Right now, keeping them on your radar is important. The exec sponsor, in this case, again, these are all illustrated. You could completely redo this based on what you're seeing. The exec sponsor in this example, right, has got the right level of influence, is an exec, is actually going to benefit from the change. Their team is actually going to be implementing and driving the change at the pole front. They are the people who will get the right impact. So they will consult their team. Actually, if you evolve it to the next level, you can join these bubbles with dotted lines as well, saying who influences whom. right? So B might be influenced most by the power users, might be D. So if the power users say, hang on, this offering or this premium package is going to be much more relevant to me, or these new features are going to be relevant, worth the investment, we might be more amenable to justifying that. So building those dotted lines is very, very important as well. You might also want to build in cross lines. So for example, you may have a situation that E might be a loud decibel. Now, anything that D does, E is going to go against, right? Because they've got some history, right? So drawing that out very quickly, visually, straight away gives you a view of the power equations, gives you a view of where to put your time and effort. If you don't do this, for example, then, in Australia, there's a saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? And you're always then putting effort behind where the noise is, whereas you wouldn't get the result there. You may have blockers who may be hidden in the ecosystem, who may be very quiet, but could potentially stymie your efforts. So starting with this plot is a key exercise. This is something we did for org change management. It's a Six Sigma technique we use to drive change in client organizations, and I felt it was very pertinent for relationship management and sales. So that's why I continue to leverage it. Now, once you've plotted all these individuals, right, you then look at their dispositions or the level of support. Now, let's say the exec, the CFO in this case, might be neutral. They don't really have a worry. They are only going to block it if they see a noise. They have a no vote. They can veto things. But if things are going fine, they're not going to worry too much. So this person, even if they are highly positive versus they are neutral, it doesn't matter much to you. All you need them is not to exercise their veto. So you want to keep them at the neutral point, keep that ongoing contact, keep a ear to the ground to understand that there is no toxic input going to this individual, right? Now, you don't need to talk to this individual directly. I'll come to how to draw that input out. Your exec sponsor, right? Let's say they are neutral as well. Now, that is not going to work very well for you. You need the exec sponsor to be highly supportive, especially if you've got competing providers in there, if you've got competing interests in there. So here you need a high level of touch. You need to deploy your CX layer to be able to give them that TLC, to be able to keep the visible contact, to have the informal connections, to be able to draw anything that they're not formally telling you. An exec sponsor may not confide in you, unless you really have a very strong personal equation built over a period of time. The exec sponsor may possibly confide in another exec who walks in and says, look, I've seen 5 other execs talk about this problem. Aren't you experiencing it? And they may say, now that you tell me about it, yes, I do. Right. So the exec sponsor is going to be very important, and you need to keep them, let's say you decide, and this is again not cast in stone, right? This is just an illustrative example. So let's say you want them highly positive. You could even say low, medium, positive, chalega. But the key is that for every box, you need to move the individual. Every column, you need to move the individual. There is effort and time to be invested, right? And so you need to be very careful of where you put this effort and time. You don't want to be, someone who's trying to please all. You focus on where the challenges are. And I think the user community, let's say they are mid to, low negative. They are really not in favor of what you're looking to drive. So these kind of people, what do you do to make them mildly positive? You again want them to be supportive. So when B speaks to C, they get an input that, yes, this is pretty good. It's all right. So B says, okay, I see value. I'm highly positive. C has got no issues. But B may give more value to what D has to say, the power users. And the power users are saying, hang on, boss, this is the cat's whiskers, right? The premium package is something you must take, because the kind of benefit, the kind of return we get, the kind of engagement with our customers we're getting is mind-blowing, right? So that reinforces B's opinion. And then you may have this high decibel group, right, or individual. Now, they may be low or medium negative. You really want them to shut up, right? You don't want them to really become cheerleaders and dance around with pom-poms for your offering. But you don't want that decibel going against you. Decibel can always, fan unnecessary flames and, create fire where there is none. So this is just an illustrative example. Again, for each of these movements, you have to put investment of time and effort. So be judicious in where you put the right level of investment. And this is something which you will want to keep handy with you, revisit every month initially, and maybe then keep it quarterly as well. So you know where each individual stands vis-a-vis yourself, your organization, your offering, so that you have a ear to the ground, you're responsive, you're proactive, you're taking out challenges before they hit you. You could again use clients to support you. And if you then go down to the influencing plan, so now that you have decided how much to move each stakeholder, you need to draw out what are each individual's expectations. You need to understand what are their concerns. You need to understand what are the challenges these individuals are facing. Now, none of these people, not all of these people will confide in you to that level. You can try, but the key is to fan out, right? So if you've got a couple of directs, couple of junior people, use them. Get them to start having these coffee relationships with clients where people are away from their desks, away from colleagues, having relaxed conversations. Use your exec layer to map into the execs. Use overlapping exec connect. So you can also potentially have a high-buy relationship, but where you send something from the body language and get your exec and say, look, this guy looked extremely concerned when I mentioned this proposal. Can you give him a call and figure out what's happening, right? So the key is to start with baselining their expectations, their concerns, their challenges, creating a time-bound plan, right? Over these weeks, what will I do? So for example, many years back, I'd seen Accenture had perfected this to an art, and they are much more evolved now. But they had dossiers on each client, and they would say that, look, over the next 18 months, this is the set of investments the client is planning. These are the kind of things that have been budgeted. And for each of these investments, here is the rough value that is going into the budget. Here is the individual who is sponsoring those investments. And before those investments are actually cleared and procurement gets wind of them and they go to market, they've already executed a plan where they might say that partner X will go and meet the initiative owner. Partner Y will go and meet with the approver or the sponsor, and they call it down to whether they will go do this over a game of golf or over a dinner or a lunch. So all of these are pre-built and they're time bound and they were deployed, right? So looking at the support channel and the persona. So who are you going to use to influence this person? It could be one, it could be multiple people. What are the resources? What are the asks you have? Now, this is something which is strictly confidential. So each row you would break out, you would share with different people in your organization. Some of the influencers could be from your client organization. There may be supporters, there may be coaches. So you can actually leverage their help. They can go out and have these confidential coffees with people who could be potential blockers to draw out what are the objections they have. Why do they have those objections? And you may not be able to make friends with everybody. You just need to neutralize opposition at times, which may try and make way for your competition to make an entry. So you assemble this and keep this close picture only for yourself and probably your one-up manager, right? But you don't make it widespread, because if this is seen by too many people, it can cause problems. So this influencing plan is something which was pure gold in many OCM engagements that we leveraged, and we saw a lot of value. So yeah, so that's really about stakeholder management. Any questions or any comments, anything you guys have done which has been useful? Have you seen techniques like these being used?
This is interesting, but we've had a scenario, right? So what if the users are not so receptive to change, and the exec sponsor is a big time loyalist of us, right? So how do we convince the users to move from X to Y to ensure that they get that we get user support, and that eventually is what exec sponsor would look at, right? So only if they are convinced, the exec sponsor would be convinced. So how do we handle this scenario where there is a receptive to change, where they might be using different set of tools? So what's your thought on that, Ashok?
Okay, look, let me give you a more pertinent example, right? In Wipro, we used LinkedIn extensively. Many of us had Navigator licenses. And what LinkedIn did was they took a dump and said, look, here are the guys who are dormant, here are the guys who are casual users, and here are the power users. Here are the gurus. and their CS rep actually traveled to Australia. She made time. She contacted each of us early on, got us all into a room and said, look, here is where, Ashok, Zahid, Anand are your usage patterns. Here is where your power users are being able to use. Here is where they have created leads, they have created opportunities. They have been able to actually draw business out of this. And here is where best in class examples are in the market. Here is a profile, a best-in-class profile from Wipro itself. This guy has used his LinkedIn profile very well to project himself, Wipro's image very well, and been able to network with customers, leverage that network. So suddenly what they were doing was they were using the power users to influence the users, right? Again, this was third-party influencing. I think the next level would be to actually step out and have the power users incentivized to make impact on the users who are facing challenges, saying, let's form a buddy system, and every time you solve an inquiry from a user, we will give you some kind of a notional brownie point which might improve your status, like in Google Maps, right? You answer a question about a cafe, you get a few points, and you get your star status elevated each time you respond to a question or you help somebody identify the opening times of a location. So you start incentivizing your power users to influence your users, because your users may not directly be relevant to you because they may feel you're trying to sell something all the time. So those invisible dotted lines need to be extracted and need to be leveraged. Does that give you a couple of ideas?
Absolutely, Ashok. Absolutely. I think leveraging power users is what we have to do. But I think it comes from change management, right? Say, for example, if customers are coming in from Salesforce or any other legacy product, they tend to just look for the same set of features in our own products as well. So that's where the reluctance is. But there could be power users where we can adopt well. Yeah.
That's right. Look, and sometimes these could be areas of opportunity. They may give you ideas to enhance your product, right? And if you take their ideas on board, you put that in your backlog, you say that, look, that's pure gold. We don't have this feature. We would love to build it. And thanks to you. And I want to thank you and take you to lunch with my exec. Suddenly you're made a fanboy of this customer who was a fanboy of Salesforce, who's got this legacy connection. So be open as well, because that influencing process could actually expose opportunities for you. And there are different ways to, we say here horses for courses, right? So there are different ways to influence different personas. Here we have just bunched them as execs and users, but when you put in names there, you got personas, you get attributes, and you got to think about how to work there. Yes, Anova, please go ahead.
Yeah, Ashok, as you mentioned, the list of power users, I think I am very comfortable when it comes to striking a conversation with power users and to an extent executive sponsor. But how do you get, into a conversation with exec, a higher authority, or how do you put a foot in the door to sort of start a conversation? Or what sort of mindset should you go into? So that would be my question.
Yeah, look, Sanova, sometimes, it may not be effective for the CSM to map all stakeholders, right? And you need to sort of have this layer of the organization or an org chart drawn out and call out who's going to map whom. So your time is spent more effectively, and instead of going wide, you go deep. So the exec could potentially be best mapped by your own organization's exec, right? Somebody who's similar. In some cases, you may tap into your CFO to talk to their CFO, right? Because they may speak the same language. They may be seeing the same regulatory trends. So leverage people in your organization, leverage people outside your organization, leverage partners, leverage SIs, right? Leverage large customers of this client if you can, if they happen to be customers of your organization, right? Sometimes leverage this customers' competition. Sometimes leverage people who have worked with them in the past, who may be more open to talking to you. But you definitely can't expect to talk to everybody and have the same level of trust, because moment if people find that everybody is trusting Sanova, people might say, look, if I tell her something, it might percolate to others in my organization. Because even in your client, when we say client, we think of one monolithic organization. it's full of people, right? People with agendas, people with politics. So when you navigate this, you will have to divide and conquer.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so on to the last one. I've babbled on.
One more point, Ashok, if you don't mind, if you can go to the
Please,
last
Raj.
slide.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So yeah, this is really great. I mean, and we myself also working towards it. But the challenge what I'm facing is in some of the accounts is when there is an internal conflict between different teams in the customer side. Managing that becomes very challenging. You know.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
how to overcome this challenge is something I'm looking at, because suppose the CIO is the executive sponsor and the who has already signed the contract and we are already in the adoption or the consumption phase, and then there is a team of the business users who are reluctant to the change management, and they try to push back the management or even the executive sponsor, and that is the challenge where we face to have a successful journey in that particular customer place. So any
Yeah.
ideas or any thought on that?
Yeah. Look, this is where it gets really interesting, because you are now entering the part of the playground where the big kids play, right? And the falls are more real, the pain is more real, and here you have to play a bit like the big kids. You have to form groups. You have to align with like-minded people. You have to trust each other to have each other's back, right? So I'll give you an example. Now this is sensitive, so I'm not going to name any organization, right, or any individual as well. But in an organization that was one of our clients, I worked very closely with a senior general manager, and we had the CIO of the organization who was tooth and nail looking to get my organization out, right? And we had buy-in all the way from the chairman, the board, the CEO, and all the way down to the analyst who would process my invoices. I knew everybody, and so it was not easy for this individual to do that. Now we had a lot of support, but no matter any level of outreach to this individual would not work, because when he was between jobs at some point, he was looking for very not so clean methods, to engage and draw influence, draw income. And at that point, my organization said, look, we want to support you. We want to help you find a relevant position. We'll help you get interviews with all these people. But here is where we draw the line, because we got to go upstairs and report to our board as well, our auditors as well. So we're not going to do this sort of thing, right? And that threw him completely off balance. And we had another competitor who invested in individuals. They said, we'll bet on you, right? We know you'll land somewhere on your feet. Until then, we'll look after you. Now, moment he landed in this client, he started hammering away at us. He started hammering at our credibility, right? And there are one or two clients who came to me and said, look, this guy is not ethical. We have had issues with him as well. He is actually offering consulting to our organization. His wife sits on the board of the consulting organization, right? He's got a conflict of interest and he's drawing all kinds of contracts to them. So we as procurement are blocking it, and that's cheesed him off no end, right? So he's coming after us as well. And we see that he's trying to trash your brand as well. So what is the history with you? And at some point, a group exec called us on a call, me and my exec leader, and they said, look, tell us openly what's happened, right? Initially, we were a bit more surprised, so we were polite, but then we said, we'll go back, have a think about it. Then we called for a call, and we gave them the open description, right? Saying, this is the reason why this individual is hammering at us. Now, look, the interesting part is they heard us in confidence. They did not do anything about it. So there was no ethical action taken against him. There was nothing done because this individual was extremely powerful. But the rest of the organization understood the genesis of his objections. They understood the rationale for his behavior. And they said, it's got nothing to do with the credibility of this partner, right? The partner has got a compelling offering. They've got great people, and try to play with a straight bat, and they're copying it for that, right? So from that perspective, they at least, our integrity, our brand got protected. A lot of the noise, the individual, basically, if you look at this chart, right, he was an exec, right? He slid from there to there, right? His decibel increased. So sometimes you have to ally, you have to play those those equations. You have to form partnerships with people on the client side, and you have to look after these people. Just as you work hard to make your clients, your buyers look good, they have to also help protect your brand. So you ally with these people. This is the sort of equations you would find top-end consulting firms engaging in, top-end boards engaging in, tier one SIs engaging in. So it takes a lot more investment. It takes a lot of maturity, and these plays are actually very demanding. So be careful when you enter that side of the playground, is all I can say. But be fearless. Be fearless. Go with a clean heart and an open mind. If you're ethical, you're doing the right thing, it's all right. If you're playing underhand games, then I would say, you're really heading for trouble in the short term or the long term at some point.
Yeah. So while we'll try to align with the KPIs and their business challenges, and on this, trying to support them in different personas in their organization, but their own internal conflicts and internal politics that really affects the whole purpose of this the journey. That's
It does.
Yeah.
It does, and there is no clear answer for that. This is where it goes into the deep end of human behavior, right? And that is where you may even find that your organization will also be political, right? There's politics on both sides. You may even find that I worked in organizations where there were parts of my account team who allied with another part of the organization because they would be able to sign deals where they get the benefit versus the service.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes it becomes very bare-fanged, right? The client comes to you and says, "Look, your partner is actually engaged with that guy, and I'm with you. We have to go head to head, mate. Are you in this with me or not?" Right?
Right. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So final slide: the nature of skills, capabilities. Look, this is a tough one, right? You can talk about all the blurb about confidence and listening skills and analytical mind and all that, right? Now, I'll just put it very simply in terms of where we are seeing this shifting. In the past, the CSMs, the customer success, account people needed a skill to be able to present, to be able to sell, to be able to make an impact. It was all about driving that resonance, catching that interest. It's actually moving to taking a seat and listening, right? To be able to problem solve with that view. So to be able to listen, to be able to draw out that information, to be able to respond to that information. So that's really the second box that I meant to illustrate. You're really getting deep into the layers of the client situation. And I think where this will evolve is you'll see more and more yourself solving problems with the client, with partners, coming together as equals and solving things, where you're giving tangible benefit to the client, right? Where you're creating new business for the client, where you're finding segments of the market that they're untapping and they're not tapping well, where you're helping them create and invent new products, right? Many of the design thinking firms that I'm aware of are doing these game-changing things, right? So that is where you see that going, right? Obviously, the Apple iPhone is an example. It's all about design. Smartphones were around, but people took it because it was simple, it worked, it was effective. Now that had then engendered a whole investment in design thinking. Banks have designers, even utilities are using designers to think about how to elicit a problem better and to solve it. So I think the skills that you will need, again, think about design thinking very seriously, because that will bring in empathy, that will bring in good listening skills, that will bring in problem solving skills to the fore, which will help you become much more successful. The second part is all about the commercial side, right? Earlier, it was always the provider versus the buyer. You then invoice the client for the service, the client pays you, and away you go. Now the commercial side is often becoming more and more partnership oriented. There are gain share equations. You help me find a saving, I will share some of the benefit with you. There are providers who are investing in consulting engagements. They're paying real dollars for consultants to come in, look at their clients, or look at their clients and their interactions and operating model to make it better. And the gains are shared between them and the client. So the providers are saying, we are putting skin in the game to actually help. We are helping you get more value from moving on to our cloud platform, for example. Now, where this is going to go is it'll become much more complex, where you'll have ecosystem orchestration, where you'll have multiple players come in, where you may be matchmaking between your clients, where you may be actually helping two of your clients merge, for example, right? Or to create a joint offering, saying, look, I can see both of you have got fantastic offerings and both of you are missing a blind spot. You actually combine a couple of your services or combine a couple of your products. Here is a segment in the market that is untapped for you. They may say that's fine, but how do we go about doing it? There are regulatory challenges. Then you bring in expertise around regulation, around finance, but you will then become a much taller deal maker in the market who will basically be able to orchestrate multiple parties. So this is a skill which will take time, but which will be hugely beneficial. So evolving that is going to be important. The third bit is about competition, right? It was always about win-lose equations with competition. Now the world has grown up a bit. We realize that many a times, we have to work with competition. IBM was obviously the most classic example. They would come in and own large complex deals. There would be people providing infrastructure, boxes, products, services, consulting, and IBM would bring it all together. They have some phenomenal expertise in this space. Accenture do as well, but I think IBM is a bit more grown up compared to much of the market. So that is another skill which organizations need to continue to build. Now, all of the GSIs have got these skills as well. They have evolved. These days, it's pretty commonplace to walk into engagement and to say, look, to solve this problem, I need this, and this partner to come in with me. And in other engagements, these so-called partners might even compete with you because they may have parallel services or parallel offerings. So it is your EQ that is going up, where you're building in a cooperative or a collaborative play. And the last part is aligned with the one above it, which is orchestrating ecosystems. So rather than have a prime versus a sub, rather than have 2 or 3 parties grudgingly come together, you actually bring entities together on an ongoing basis. So your relationship skills become 360. They're not just client facing, they're sideways facing, they're backwards facing, they're also upward and downward facing within your organization. So, the sales guy who puts on a polite face, best, smile for the customer and comes in and rips apart his delivery team is set for failure. Because the whole persona that is going to be successful here is going to be genuine, is going to be basically showing the same authenticity, the same behaviors, the same cerebral equation, agility to be able to solve problems across the board. And this is the sort of person who will bring people together and be more successful. So to my mind, the column on the right is where this is all going to go. So think about how you can become effective in each of these plays, becoming collaborative problem solvers, becoming orchestrators of ecosystems, becoming a creator of new value in the market by bringing together multiple individuals and entities. So to my mind, that's really what I see coming in different pockets in the market, but it's gaining momentum and ferocity. So I'll stop here now. I think we have pretty much covered everything. Any questions, guys? And Zed, Anand, thanks for your patience. I think I've blown past the timeline.
No, I appreciate your patience because the amount of value that you added to a lot of things with real world examples. I mean, I'm sure the learners have benefited a lot. That's very important.
Thanks, Zed.
So last round of questions, anybody?
Yeah, maybe I'll
Not
take
a
yeah,
Not a
sorry.
question, but then the session was very interesting because the stakeholder confluence and how one. So we want to make customer success a science, but somewhere I think the CSM brings in a lot of creativity in that science, and that's where that brings in the difference. In some accounts you're successful, with and some accounts you still don't figure your way out as to how to get this. So it's a combination, more of a science to some extent, but then the individual has to get a lot of creative and Ashok, design thinking has been on my agenda for a long time, but I haven't taken it up, purely laziness. But then I realized the importance of it, so that probably will be my next stop on the learning curve.
Please do, Shweta. It will richly reward you, and a basic minimal knowledge of even the double diamond, for example, is a great start. But after that, going deeper, unpairing, unsaid issues, looking at empathy, all of these are phenomenal tools. I mean, the best designers are actually taught in design schools for about 4 years before they come out, and their personas itself are very, very different compared to the left brain alpha personalities you might see in high-end consulting organizations who are extremely logical, or the very highly cerebral behaviors you might see, which is completely clinical, that you might see from solution architects and engineers who are looking at all kinds of trends and technology, but not looking at the human factor. So all of that becomes very, very pertinent when you leverage design thinking. It's a great tool. So I'm glad you saw value, and hopefully this motivates you to go unpack it.
Sure, it does. It does.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
Shweta, look, you mentioned that you wanted to learn from my experience. So hopefully, there was a lot in there. Hopefully, there were some nuggets or nibbles which you could take away and start.
Absolutely, Ashok. One is what it while you've given some interesting frameworks in the process, which I will be some probably I would have started in some rudimentary way, but then I realized the importance of it today. And second is most importantly, while when you were taking us through the stakeholder engagement, the power users, the users, while I try with my own ways and means and tricks to have some kind of influence, and I always keep very close to the power users and users. I tend to have one line of connect where I directly get feedback from the ground. While I make sure that initially I take several people to the speaker, the executive sponsor. So the executive sponsor sees me as a person who can pull in a lot of resources and the person who will drive things. I try to establish myself that way so that he starts talking to me eventually in 6 to 8 months. Some places have been successful, some places miserably failed also. But then
Yes.
this confluence, the creativity that you brought in your account, some of the examples, there's a lot of things we can take nuggets and implement wherever we are stuck in different parts, because there's no perfect solution or recipe to the problems we have. Just politics is common across every account has that between when you grow up vertically, because when you get an account you have a plan. I have to reach to this level. You start at the operational level, but your goal is the CPO, CIO, the exec sponsor. Somewhere there you have to go, so you have to figure a way out. There is politics everywhere. So be it between two teams, I've had a very classical case in the past where one team brought in the product and the other team had to take it forward, and they don't see eye to eye. And we've had hilarious conversations listening them fight it out. And then how we figured a way and forged it. And from a very small account, it became $1 million account. It became a huge success story for me, which I've used it in several forums. But then these are pieces you learn, you pick up that probably this trick might work. So learned a lot today. Thanks a lot, Ashok, for bringing in your experience and sharing it with us.
You're very welcome, Shweta. And look, everything you said basically reassures us that the bots are coming, but they can't take our jobs away.
No, they cannot. They just cannot.
No,
Because
they
we
can't.
bring in that creative aspect. Somewhere a stakeholder might like what the way Santosh proposes or an Atul proposes a problem or the solution to a problem, or is a trusted advisor. You may not trust anyone else but this person. How can a chatbot replace these two people? It cannot. So it is important that we bring in and become the trusted advisor. Once we get there, things might not become easier, but at least you have an ear and a eye in your customer organization will keep sharing inputs with you, and you know what is happening on the ground.
That's right. Absolutely. So just quickly covering off what others' expectations were. Sanoba, you mentioned you wanted to efficiently lead. You've got 2 people in your team. How do you engage with your team? How do you deliver value to your customer? Hopefully, Sanoba, that gave you a few ideas. You saw something useful.
Yes, Ashok. I mean, places where I was everywhere. My thought process was like, how do I connect with every business unit or stakeholders? And I think channeling my energy to the ones that I can approach, and then giving the rest of the work to the CEO or the CIO, pulling them in places is a nice thought that you shared with me. So I'm gonna take that forward. Of course, the framework that you have provided, I will go ahead and implement it. I have not started any of it. However, from the client perspective, I do collect information when it comes to the business of the customer. But how do we translate it into a way that we could make the most out of it as a partner is a mindset change that I'm taking from here today. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Wish you all the best, Sanoba. I'm sure you'll do excellently.
Thank you.
Now, Priya, you mentioned you're in Sprinkler, and your question was where support can help. Hopefully, it gave you a few ideas. I mean, people like power users, for example, they will relish an opportunity to speak to your support team or to your product team. They will relish an opportunity to contribute to your backlog, for example, or to get a view of the backlog to know what future features are like. So I know I didn't actively cover support, but did that give you some value, Priya?
Well, I got far more than what I was looking for, because when I was looking from a support point of view, I was mostly looking at how do they engage. I mean, like mostly my job is backend, and then are there like special skills, or they just gifted people? But then the kind of framework you gave, it gives me a lot of structure as to what goes in their head, rather than just doing this technical backend support kind of tickets. Yeah, thank you so much for this. This has been quite insightful, honestly, and very structured for me to understand how success goes about doing things.
Absolutely, it is by design. Wonderful. I'm delighted. Thank you. Thank you. And then we have Atul. So Atul, you were looking at difference between project versus product management, looking at customer success versus customer support. I didn't pointedly attack those, but was there value for you in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like as everyone mentioned that I may not go into how insightful it was. It was very insightful, definitely, and I'll take a lot of brownie points when I coordinate coming from next week when I'll be taking up charge. That how can I be a better leader, because I do head a team, and not only I'll be a better leader after this session, but also I'll be moving forward, be a better CS, not a support, but a success guy. And definitely project management goes along with it. So it was very insightful, and thank you so much for this session. And I'll definitely am a better CS after this session.
Fantastic, Atul. Fantastic. Look, Tom Peters visited Mumbai many years back. He was a management guru when we were in B school. So I used to follow him closely. And at the end of the thing, he addressed a bunch of CEOs, about 200, and he said, look, whatever you want to implement, do it within 48 hours. If you don't do it within 48 hours, it's not going to get done. So a suggestion is, when I try to do something strategic like this, if I have my diary responsive and reactive, then I look for residual time, and that's always when I'm tired, when I'm not alert. So typically for anything strategic, I put diary blockers saying I'm going to sit down and do my stakeholder map on, say, Wednesday morning, which is a more relaxed day, for example, or on a Thursday afternoon. I will look at the problem solving matrix. So think about blocking time off proactively, and if that time is needed for something else, by all means give it, but move the invite. Don't delete that blocker. Get time somewhere else.
Definitely, when you're talking about blocking strategies and implementing a strategy in 2 days or 48 hours, a very simple strategy I wanted to implement in my organization, that was everyone installing Grammarly in their systems. And unfortunately, I have been 25% successful in that, because the organization is still very traditional, and they feel that writing communication, like communication through writing, is not that important when you can actually call up that person. So like post this session, I definitely will take it forward that I'll make a point that within 72 hours at least, I'll can implement a strategy, at least in my CS vertical.
That's right. And you don't have to fully implement it. You have to start it. You get it
Yeah,
started.
definitely is like a step, like a first step to like 1,000 steps is what I feel. So
Spot on. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And then Santosh, different perspectives on how to achieve more success, stakeholder management. So hopefully there was a bit in there around those
Yes,
topics.
yes, very much. I mean, obviously, it was very helpful. Just very structured way you have put it. Sorry, I'm driving, so we might have some background noise.
No problem. No problem. No, you
It
drive
was
safe.
great learning.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Drive safe, Santosh. Don't. Cool. And Setu, you're looking at outside perspectives. So hopefully that was useful.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ashok. First off, thank you so much for doing this on a Sunday afternoon, and 2 hours of your family time is with us right now. I understand that. So thanks for doing that. And see, as a leader, right? So we'll have to give it back to our people who are at least looking up to us for a few things. I think it's streamlining of thoughts was very important. And after this session, right, I think we've got answers to few of the challenges. And right now it's time for us to go back and relook at our account book and just execute it, right? Thank you so much for that, Ashok.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Excellent. I'm delighted. And then we have Gaurav. So you wanted to understand, top 3 objectives of the CEO, CIO as well. You're engaged with CHROs. So I tried to bring in a few perspectives from the CEO and the board angle. Although I think it was more adjacent to this. The CEO, is a different stakeholder. People who become CEOs also suddenly have to act and think differently. I have a few friends who are CEOs, and I know that moment you ask them about any of these questions where we engage in, they say, talk to my CIO, he will help you. Talk to my CFO, right? My mandate is to sit down with the regulator. My mandate is to get the board across the line. So it's a bit different, but hopefully you got some nuggets out of this.
No, absolutely. Ashok, I think you brought in a new perspective for me as well. I've been managing most of the strategic accounts for my SAP India. My focus was more majorly to what is executive sponsor thinking, what is his thought process, are we going in the right direction? But you brought a very good slide of stakeholder mapping, that power users are also important at the same point of time, who becomes a voice for you in front of executive sponsors. So I think I need to start spending more time with power users, which I'm not doing today. Because that will help me to bring a confidence in executive sponsor as well. And just to highlight why I brought the CEO top agenda, because I've seen organization, my sales team has been pushing the organization to do an upsell and kind of stuff for a long time. But a message came from a CEO, we have got the investment from XYZ company, and that investor needs digitalization to be happen in the organization for particular processes. And after pushing for 4 5 years, that organization didn't look for it. But as soon as that message comes from the CEO that we are getting an investment, and this is a huge investment, and let's look at the digitalization for a particular processes, we got that deal, a huge deal on a table within a month or two. So I thought that, just want to understand. I understand CEO looks after growth, sustainability, other factors, but any of the common factors, and you brought the right angle on the table. I think
Wonderful.
well said. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize, guys. Look, I have blown past your original specified time. I also lost track of time. I've got a work call, which is I'm a little late for, but
no, we'll take a minute more, because we have a ritual, which is basically that we need to do class pick with everybody's camera on. So request all learners to put on their cameras, and we'll take a class pick, which we can keep for the.
Oh, thank you. I'll cherish that.
Atul, Sanobar, Shweta. Please can we have your cameras on?
My camera isn't working.
One sec, coming on the camera.
Please do. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Atul. It was wonderful having you here. I'm sure everybody is going back with a significant amount of learning. So look forward to an increased knowledge on what we are set out to do. And all the very best.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for being so generous. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted that you also run in it. All the best, everyone. And thank you, Zed. Thanks,
Thank
Anand.
you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
Thank you
Ashok.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you all.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Ashok.